I've only just realised something, that to all of our Facebook viewers, over the last number of months, it appears as though I have a personal theme song. If you're joining us through Facebook, the reason we play the theme from Rocky, the Eye of the Tiger, is so that the kids know to go out. That is why that is, not because I think I need a theme song. Father, I just wanted to show everybody my Father's Day present. I brought the toilet paper in, and Stu said, "What does that say about the sermon this morning?" I don't know what that's about. But anyway, this is a series of bad dad jokes on toilet paper. I don't know what that's meant to indicate, but anyway, that was Father's Day is fun. We're taking a journey in, I think, one of the most confronting books of the Bible, and that's saying something, because there's certainly some confronting books of the Bible. If you've got your Bibles, turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 5. We're going to start with verse 8. If you've got a device that you usually use for your Bible, the YouVersion app has today's notes on it. You can download that for free on, I think, any platform, and you can also look at it on the web if you're looking, and the links to that are on our Facebook page. About a week or so ago, I posted a question on Facebook. I said, so tell us, what are some of the questions that Christians tend to avoid that you think we need to not avoid? I got a lot of interesting responses, really helpful. One of the themes and one of the most difficult questions that we as Christians face is this: why do bad things happen to good people? Now, there are some bad things that happen to good people that have no explanation, obvious to us. Like, sometimes there is an earthquake, sometimes somebody gets cancer, sometimes, there's lots of bad things that happen to good people that, and I think we probably need to do a whole sermon series on things that are not, that are tackling that question. And I'm keen to, for us as the church family, I want to be the kind of church that doesn't avoid anything, any of the difficult questions. Some of the other reasons, though, that bad things happen to good people, there are actually explanations of. It's because injustice happens. It's because people are treated differently than other people. And that is what Ecclesiastes is tackling here. And I, as we said, as we've taken this journey together, we are assuming that Solomon is the author of Ecclesiastes. There's a lot of debate about that, but it's clear that the text wants us to assume that, and if the Bible wants us to assume something, we're going to assume it. So verse 8 says, "If you see the poor oppressed in a district and justice and rights denied, don't be surprised at such things." If you see people getting ripped off, people getting punished, people getting hurt, it's saying don't be surprised at such things. Why? Well, Solomon says, "For one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both others higher still. The increase from the land is taken by all, and the king himself profits from the fields." In order to understand the rest of what we're talking about this morning, you need to understand these verses particularly, because I think here we get a picture of why injustice happens in the world, and it's a bit of a confronting picture. The word there for, when it says for one official is eyed by a higher one, in the NIV, it's the same word from Genesis chapter 4 that Cain said of his brother Abel, "Am I my brother's keeper?" The word for keeper and eyed is the same thing. And the assumption is, yeah, we're meant to be our brother's keeper. We're meant to be looking out for each other, but instead of looking out for people and seeing people as inherently valuable, what is happening, Solomon suggests, is people are looking out for people in order to see them as a means of getting money. And basically, the people that do the hard work, that money gets taken from them, and their money gets taken from people above them and people above them, until ultimately the people in authority get the most. Solomon is suggesting that much injustice in the world is systemic. It's not just a result of one person being a bad person. It's a result of a system that is set up in order to maximize the benefit for the most powerful people. When people become a means to an end, when I am eyeing them for what I can get out of them, rather than understanding that they are inherently valuable in their own right, that is the basis of almost all injustice. Injustice is about where you put your eyes. On yourself and your own needs, or on those who are being affected by your decisions. One of the sayings that I got from my dad on this Father's Day, this is not, but Heather said to me, because she's hung around my dad a fair bit, working with us in Fusion, and also me, and she says often when I'm speaking, she can hear my dad coming out, because my dad has been a significant mentor in my life, and I'm really proud of what he's achieved with his life. But one of the things he used to say that has stayed with me and challenged me ever since he said it was, abuse is when I use you to meet my needs without taking your highest interest into consideration. Abuse is when I use you to meet my needs without taking your highest interest into consideration. Solomon is saying that not all abuse is a result of one bad person doing bad things, though sometimes it is. That much of the injustice that happens in the world is a result of systems, whole ways that we organise ourselves that are in themselves abusive. And he actually points out something that the Liberal Party in Australia and the Republican Party in America and Margaret Thatcher failed to understand. And we keep hearing about trickle-down economics. Trickle-down economics says if you can make the people at the top richer, then everybody else will get the benefit of that. What Solomon is saying is, no, the way economics works is trickle up. That injustice happens when the poor people at the bottom are used for the benefit of the people at the top. And we actually know that that is actually how economics works. It's been tried, we've tried it. Both here in Australia and in America. President Reagan in America was a great proponent of trickle-down economics. And both he and George W. Bush very clearly cut taxes on the highest levels of people in order to make their life better, and assuming that was going to fix the whole economy. It certainly meant that more money went into the economy, but the outcome is that the people at the top, after-tax income rose 6% for the bottom percentage, of the people at the bottom fifth of the economy, which sounds fine until you understand that the people at the top income, because of that trickle-up economics, increased by 80%. That's how trickle-up economics works, and it's something we've got to watch. Solomon is warning against us that unless we watch and have checks on self-interest, the rich keep getting richer, and to borrow Midnight Oil's phrase, the poor get the picture. Solomon is also saying that much injustice results in systems that are perpetuated by people in power. Systems that are perpetuated by people in power. So this is interesting for us to get our heads around. Part of what my hope is that we as a church family can have the guts to see where are we part of systems that are fundamentally unjust. In a big picture, here in Australia, the average wealth of the highest 20% of our population from 2003 to 2016 increased by 53%. The middle 20% their incomes rose by 32%. And in real terms, the lowest 20% here in Australia, in that period from 2003 to 2016, had their incomes cut or declined by 9%. This is how we've organised our economy here in Australia. But it's more than just about dollars. Systems are more than just about economic dollars. Governments are now reaping the benefits of poker machines. We in Australia lose more money on gambling per capita than any other nation on the face of the planet. And particularly poker machines, $15 billion is spent by the people who can least afford to lose it. Leanne and I were quite affected. Phil came up after one service and said, "Hey, have you seen that Rich and Homeless show? Has anyone seen that? Who's seen that? The Rich and, what's it called? Filthy Rich and Homeless." We watched it. It's a bit affecting. And particularly seeing a young mum trying to look after her little kids after her abusive partner had left her in a shelter, and being told that she will have to wait 20 years for housing. In Australia, more than 116,000 people were homeless on census night in 2016. There are 137 children still on Nauru. There's a little girl who a few weeks ago poured petrol all over herself in Nauru because she was that desperate. Again, that's a result of a systematic choice we have made. We are using these children, we're talking about being a means to an end. Our government is very clear, they don't like doing it. But we see the people on Nauru as a means to stopping the boats. And so that 12-year-old girl is a means to an end. In Australia, did you know still, a little Aboriginal girl born between 2010 and 2012 still can expect to live 10 years less than a non-Indigenous person born in Australia, just because she's Indigenous. On average, Australian women have to work an extra 56 days a year if they wanted to earn the same pay as men for doing the same work. In terms of the environment, America's top 10% of income earners, if you're in the top 10% of income earners in America, you will emit 6 times the carbon dioxide in the way, just through a normal year, of people in the bottom 50%. So what's the big deal about that? Well, the evidence is pretty clear about global warming. And it seems that the richer people are moving us there faster, even though the bottom 50% of Americans emit 4 times the amount of carbon that would be required per capita to only increase temperatures by 2%. So they reckon that in order to only increase carbon emissions by 2%, we would need to, each of us emit around 2.1 tonnes of carbon per capita for the world, and that would be okay. Do you know which country emits the most carbon per capita of any country in the world? You'll find in your notes there's a graph. We are the champions. Australia, per capita, emits more carbon. The top three are Canada, the US, and number one, we get the gold medal for emitting the most carbon of developed countries, the top 15 emitters, per capita. Now, of course, other countries like China emit more, but per capita, and it's not politically expedient for us to do anything about it. We've got a new Prime Minister because it wasn't politically expedient to do anything about it. These are just some examples of systems that perpetuate injustice. I think particularly the environment one is a system that's perpetuating injustice not only on our kids but on their kids. British Prime Minister Edmund Burke said, society is meant to be a contract between those who have been, those who are, and those who will be. So at a macro level, we can see what Solomon's talking about, that there are systems that are just simply unjust. The Baptist World Aid put out this little guide every year, the ethical fashion guide, because often the clothes we wear perpetuate injustice, and I encourage you to grab a copy of that. I want to ask you, though, so what? I'll bet you there's a big, as you hear me talking now, there's a big part of you that doesn't even want to hear this. There's a big part of you that says, yeah, but I'm a good person. And we as Christians have made much of our approach to faith about my personal faith, and we've avoided discussions about the systems we perpetuate and are part of. And that's true at lots of different levels, whether it's even about our churches, that we judge solely on the basis of what benefit I get out of them, rather than on the basis of the family that I'm part of. So I see my church in terms of my emotional experience on a Sunday morning, or it can be on the basis of my family, and I see my family on the basis of how much stress they cause me or not, and you know, one of the dangers can be in any family that there'll be people who are getting missed, who are not being seen, or at a school where there is a system that sets itself up to see some kids as the annoying kids, the bad kids, the ones that no one wants to talk to. Or in a workplace where people are seen as bits of a machine as a means to an end, either customers, clients, or even workers. Or even when you go to McDonald's or the supermarket and you're going to buy your stuff, and you're seeing you're not realising that you're talking to a person. You fail to look in the eyes of the person who's handing you a cup of coffee, and you see them as a means to an end. I think Solomon is wanting to challenge all of us to say the real danger is we start seeing people in terms of what they can give us as a means rather than inherently valuable in their own right. He goes on and he basically does a deconstruction of a capitalist economy long before capitalist economies existed. He says in verse 10, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. One of the things you have to face in yourself is where you are perpetuating unjust systems, you are benefiting from them. And what Solomon's saying, those who benefit from injustice will never, on their own right, reach a point where they'll say, oh yeah, I've got enough now. I've had enough attention. I've got enough money. There will not be a point where those benefiting from injustice will say, we now have enough. We're happy now to pay a bit more tax so that that lady can have a house and that there won't be any homeless people. We're happy now to put up with the awkwardness of the behaviour of that kid so that they can be seen as a person and not a nuisance. We're happy now to put up with the discomfort of hanging around people who don't talk and act like us in order that a 12-year-old girl might be safe. Solomon is saying you don't get to that point. You don't get to the point where you say, yeah, my needs are met. You'll always feel like there's more you could get, more you could give. He goes on and he contrasts the person who is continually looking for more with the person who is happy just to be in their life. He says, the sleep of the labourer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. I've seen a grievous evil under the sun. He says, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there's nothing left for them to inherit. Solomon appears to be saying, it's interesting, he's talking about mental health long before, that was a core topic. He appears to be saying that the antidote to injustice and also a key to mental health and a key to being able to sleep at night is learning to be satisfied with what you have. He now goes on to to say some things that become themes through the whole Bible. The Apostle Paul quotes him, and so does Bono from U2. He says, everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. This too is a grievous evil. As everyone comes, so they depart. And what do they gain? Since they toil for the wind, all their days they eat in darkness with great frustration, affliction and anger. There's a song from U2, I think it's off How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb, the album, and these are the lyrics. Lay down your treasure, lay it down now, brother. You don't have time for a jealous lover. As you enter this world, or this life, I pray you'll depart with a wrinkled face and a brand new heart. I love it. And I think that's what Solomon's saying. A major theme of his book is many of us try and find meaning in getting ahead. In whatever way that, or in providing for our own comfort, whatever that means. For some of us, it is about money. For some of us, it's about power. For some of us, it's about relationships and sex. Whatever he's saying, whenever you are trying to get ahead, you're not going to enjoy your life. Whenever you are making life about your own needs, you're not going to enjoy your life. He says, he now goes on and he kind of repeats something he said earlier. He says, this is how you enjoy your life. This is how you find meaning. And this is in verse 18. This is what I've observed to be good. That it's appropriate. And his word there, appropriate, in the Hebrew means right. Like the holy right. This is the best thing. It's more than just appropriate, it's the best. For a person to eat, to drink, and find satisfaction in what he calls their toilsome labour. Who wants toilsome labour? What he's saying is, you find meaning when you find the right work to be about. And it will be hard work. N.T. Wright gives us a bit of a clue. I'll come back to the text, but N.T. Wright says, the Christian vocation is to be in prayer in the Spirit where the world is in pain, and as we embrace that vocation, we discover it to be the way of following Christ, shaped in the way of Christ, arms outstretched, holding on simultaneously to the pain of the world and the love of God. What's he saying? He's saying, you find your story when the purpose of your life is not you, but the purpose of your life is stepping into the pain of the world with God. Holding on to God and holding on to and stepping into the toilsome work that is yours. I don't know what toilsome work is yours. It may be some of the pain in your family. It may be your church. It may be your workplace. There is places of brokenness and injustice, but one of the keys is in finding your right relationship to the world. There is, as the Apostle Paul says, there is work that God planned in advance for you to do, and as you find your work, you'll find the meaning of your life. When the meaning of your life is you won't find much peace, and you will live a small, self-destructive life, is what Solomon's saying. So he's saying, find satisfaction in your toilsome labour under the sun during the few days of life God has given them, for this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives you stuff, enjoy what you have, he's saying, and the ability to accept their lot and be happy in their work. It's not wrong to have stuff. It's always wrong for stuff to have you. This is a gift of God. He said people who can live and find their right work, what's he say? He says they seldom worry about the days of their life. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. He's saying that one of the keys to mental health is something that Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl discovered in a concentration camp. He said, as you find your meaning, until you find something worth dying for, you're really not going to have something worth living for. And it's got to be bigger than you. As a church, we unashamedly believe it is our task to challenge and call and equip you to find your right work, your vocation, your calling. And at different stages of your life, the way it gets worked out may change, but you were not here to take up space. And this is what Solomon's saying. You are here to make a difference. And it is, funnily enough, it is seeing the injustice and pain in the world that actually helps find your purpose. When you spend your life living in an aesthetic, when you fill your life with ways to minimize pain and maximize pleasure, you will not find the story that God's given for you. Solomon goes on, he says, I have seen another evil under the sun, in verse 1 of chapter 6, and it weighs heavily on mankind. God gives some people wealth, possessions and honour, so that they lack nothing their hearts desire, but God doesn't grant them the ability to enjoy them, and strangers enjoy them instead. This is meaningless, a grievous evil, he says. He's saying, one of the things that breaks the cycle of injustice is learning to be satisfied with what you got. There's actually a psychological study that demonstrates that if you bring to mind the things that God has already given you, just even the material things, you're 14% less likely, apparently, to want to go and get new stuff. If you appreciate what you have, you will need less. And you will need to see people as a means to an end less. Verse 3, a man may have 100 children and live many years, yet no matter how long he lives, if he cannot enjoy his prosperity and doesn't receive a proper burial, I say the stillborn child is better off than he. It comes without meaning, it departs in darkness, and darkness is its name. And in darkness its name is shrouded. Though it never saw the sun or knew anything, it has more rest than does that man, even if he lives 1,000 years twice over, but fails to enjoy his prosperity. Don't all go to the same place. Prosperity and gain, minimizing pain, maximizing pleasure, will never, ever be an adequate meaning for life. And they will always be a recipe at the heart of injustice. One of the common denominators of all those things I talked about, all the injustices in the world, there are people making decisions oversighting, people making decisions oversighting, people making decisions who are motivated by minimising pain and maximising pleasure for themselves and for people that they're close to. The reason we are keeping kids on Nauru is we don't have an answer how to stop the flood of refugees. And so we have made a political calculation that it's okay for 126 kids to be our answer, to be our means to an end. The reason we are consuming carbon like we do, because we have decided that it's okay for our grandkids to have to cop the consequences of our decisions. We're seeking to minimise our own pain and maximise our own pleasure without seeing what it means for other people. Then Ecclesiastes 6 verse 7, everyone's toil is for their mouth, yet their appetite is never satisfied. What advantage have the wise over fools? What do the poor gain by knowing how to conduct themselves before others? Better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite. This too is meaningless and a chasing after the wind. Better, can you hear? I mean, it's just this theme that actually goes right the way through the book, but I think we need to face, because we live in one of the richest countries on earth. And what we consider as our trials and tribulations pale in significance to what 2/3 of the world have to manage. What's he saying? When I am run by my appetites, when I am run by trying to reach for stuff to make me feel better, I'm never going to fill my appetites. I'm just going to live my life on a treadmill, running for something I'll never get. But when I am willing to lay down my life, when Jesus says, if you want to find your life, take up your cross. That's the recipe for life. As we look at all these big issues, it can be tempting to think, what can one person do? I came across this cartoon when I was a little kid. I think Dad had it up on a wall somewhere, and I'll see if they can make it work. There you go. It's a whole crowd of people saying, what can one man do, or what can one woman do? Or we can make a difference. Micah 6:8, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. We address the systems that produce inequality when we start to examine who is benefited by them and who isn't. When we start to look at, even in our church, because we need systems. Systems in themselves aren't wrong, but all systems are created by fallible people, and there is I forget which law of thermodynamics it is, but there's this law in physics that says all systems wind down. It's the, someone, who's a scientist, will tell me what that is. It's the law of something. I'm looking around the room. We don't have many scientists amongst us at the moment this morning. Where's Bruce when you need him? Bruce Hocking might be able to tell me something. But anyway, atrophy, that's it. It's the law, entropy. Yeah, all systems wind down and all systems basically move towards self-interest, including the systems in our church, including the systems in your workplace, including the systems in your school. And there are some people who have the most influence and some people who have the least influence. And one of the things the Bible says over and over again, it's how the weakest people are going. That is the measure, not how the strongest people are going. You don't measure an economy by how the richest 1% are going. You don't measure a nation that way. We particularly need to address the systems that we are part of, that produce gain for us at the expense of someone else. We are called to care for those with the least power in every system we're part of. There's this beautiful picture Jesus tells at the end of time. There's a whole lot of people who think they're getting into heaven, and it's a story about a king, and the king says to them, "Depart from me, I never knew you." And then he says to some people who think they really haven't, they've really screwed up and made lots of mistakes, and he says, "Hey, come over here, come and enjoy my happiness." And they say, "What? Why? What did we do? We weren't religious enough. We didn't do the right thing enough." He said, "No. When I was in prison, you were there. When I was hungry, you were there. When I was naked, you were there. When injustice and oppression were there, you cared. You weren't full of yourself." Your task isn't to address all the injustice in the world. You cannot do that. Your task, though, is to say, "God, break my heart for what breaks yours. Show me how you do want me to address injustice in my world. Maybe injustice in my family, maybe injustice in my workplace, maybe injustice in my school, maybe injustice in my church." It's scary, isn't it? We as churches have had to face horrific news about how churches have organised themselves over the last years through the Royal Commission. And one of the things we as a church, at our AGM, we have made it clear, we as a church, we want to be a safe place for everybody. And that means we have to look at the systems and not just think about our own personal faith. We have over-personalised faith in the Western world. And what does it mean for you? We as a church are on a journey to learn how to listen in prayer. And as we finish our service today, we've talked about the last couple of weeks, we've handed out bookmarks about listening prayer. What I want to do is create a bit of space. And if you've got a bit of paper, I encourage you to pull it out, or a pen. We've got bulletins, and I think there's a little bit of white space on there. You can scribble on that. We want to actually say we as a church want to be led by Jesus, and we as individuals want to be led by Jesus. And we want to just invite him to bring to our hearts and minds, to bring to your heart and mind, are there areas of injustice that he is wanting you to focus on, that he is wanting you to do something about? We want to create the space for him to, I mean, there is no way that you can, I mean, as he looks at the world, there's so many places where his heart breaks. Your heart isn't big enough to cope with what he copes with. But there are places he is calling you to care. And I wonder, are you ready to take your eyes off yourself and put them in the places that Jesus cares about? What I want to do is just close our service with creating some space. After the service at both sites, there's people who'd love to pray with you individually. We've got up here at Mornington, there's space up the front where we come every time and pray. And at Lena Valley, I love that we sort of come around each other. And there will be a cup of tea and coffee. There's no rush. But can I encourage you? Let's just pray together. And I want to, are you willing to hear what Jesus has for you? That's the question. Are you willing to hear where there is injustice and oppression that Jesus is wanting you to care about? If you are willing, I'll bet you he's willing to show you what he's wanting you to do about it. Let's pray. Jesus, thanks for Solomon, who had the guts to be honest and just look at the world as it is and say, look, there is oppression in the world because there are systems that benefit those in power and damage those who don't have much power. And as we look around the world, we see all kinds of systems like that. It's easy for us to get overwhelmed by all that, but you call us to take up the particular cross, the particular burden that you have for us, not to take up anybody else's stuff. There is work you have for us. And so, Jesus, we just want to create some space now as individuals. We want to acknowledge that there are all kinds of forces and voices in us, but we want to step into the whole life you have for us, and we want to care about what you care about. And for me, and for my brothers and sisters here this morning, Jesus, we ask, can you show us individually, is there injustice in a system we're part of that you're wanting to bring to our attention? Is there something you're wanting us to do about it? Please bring it to our hearts and minds. We ask this in your name. I'm just going to leave some silence now. I invite you just to let the dust settle and see if you can hear what Jesus is saying. Let his voice. There'll be a still small voice. There may be a picture that emerges. There may be something that you kind of know that you've been sitting on for a while, but just see if you can let it rise. And then gradually, as you hear it, write it down. Or make a note of it. If you don't have a pen with you, make a note of it somewhere on the way.